she had never used the word dehydrate. She'd always use hydrate. That child had added the appropriate prefix and ending to a word to use it in the right context. That's a 2.5-year-old. These kids are picking up far more information and knowledge than we know they are doing. So that means when you are around children, youth, and vulnerable adults, you have to guard your conversations. They must be pure. You make sure they're also age appropriate. Don't have conversations that you don't want broadcast on the Chronicle newspaper or on some snippet on an internet scene, right? Make sure that you are protecting both yourself and those around you by being careful what you speak about and how you talk about it. Be mindful of what you're saying to friends around you. The conversations can begin to feel uncomfortable or seem to be steering in inappropriate directions. And when they do, you want to begin to use some diversion techniques. You want to change the subject. You can provide additional physical space between you and a child, youth, or vulnerable adult. There are some individuals, when they come into my counseling, and I'm not familiar with them, I may ask them to sit in the chairs and I'll sit behind my desk. Other individuals that I know and I'm more comfortable with, I might sit in the chair right next to them. But you create boundaries for your space by using your space as well to protect yourself, okay? And you can do that in your own scenarios as you're working with kids. If you feel a child, youth, or vulnerable adult is persistently trying to cross boundaries, particularly, Daniel, for someone in your position, if you have youth that are coming up and hanging on you, and you have to create a boundary space. And if you start to feel that it's inappropriate, you need to let somebody know, in authority, and get some wise advice on how to handle that. And be careful what you text to people. It gets broadcast. Anything that you text and any little picture you take on your phone that you think you're deleting is never deleted. It's out there somewhere. Now, I would never be able to find it because I don't know how to do all that. But there are people out there who can. And I will tell you this as someone who's an employee, I do check Facebook and various other forms of internet sources to check into your character when you're applying with me. And I know I am not the only individual doing that. And a picture that you took your sophomore year of high school is going to show up on that site, right? When your name is clicked in. So just keep that in mind. Protect yourself. Spiritual boundaries are essential as well. We're here to help guide them on their spiritual journey. The one thing, we might practice worship different. We may have some differences in how we structure our different churches. But the truth is, every one of the churches that are joining together to do Vacation Bible School believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life through which all persons come to know the saving grace of God the Father. And we are not ashamed to share the gospel and to share the good news. But we must do so without emotional manipulation. We want to create scenarios where people can feel safe to be emotional, but we don't want to try to create something that forces an emotional experience upon them. You understand the difference? So we're not going to use humiliation. We're not going to do shame. We're not going to use guilt. We're not going to use fear. We're not going to use coercion in any form. Instead, we will speak truthfully our need for salvation and present the gospel through God's grace and love, which can transform lives and help us to grow into faithful disciples. All of the pastors involved with the VBS are in agreement with these statements. And just so you know, every pastor has also gone through this training. Kind of a little unfair since I also wrote the training, but the test was a little easier for me. But they all had to take the test, and they had to do the background check and everything else. So everybody has participated in it. It's a good idea when you're in conversation with someone who particularly may have a different faith, especially with those that are younger than you. is to use the conversation, I agree, I disagree. Take out the conversations of I'm right, you're wrong. One of the professors at a seminary where I went when I was doing youth ministry, I wasn't planning on going into the pastorate at that time, but was doing youth ministry training. He began his theology for youth ministry like this. You have three options when we have a discussion. I agree, I disagree, or C was, I believe you're the Antichrist. And I did use that once or twice in the class. He started out one day with a scenario and said, Polly, do you believe that? And I said, yes. The next question he asked, I kind of got a feeling he was going to go off the rails, and I said, I disagree, but I can't tell you why. The next day he asked me another question. I said, I'm leaning towards C. I'm just telling you, I'm leaning towards C. And, but I got to tell you, by the end of 5 years of going through these theology courses with him, my theology was totally different. I'm very biblical, very orthodox. We were, at great odds with what we believed theologically. But I have to tell you, he taught me more about what I believe than anybody else ever has, because he forced me to look at questions and to figure out why I stood where I did. He also helped me to understand that nobody comes to their understanding without a desire to be faithful. And so it allowed me to deal with people who have differences with me with a lot more respect. I'm still willing to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't go there with you. But I understand the process a little better. So I agree, I disagree.